Most people think of Jujutsu Kaisen as a story about modern sorcerers, but it's not. The modern sorcerers are just the ones playing catch-up with the ancient sorcerers. The real foundation of the series is the Heian era, a period roughly 1,000 years ago when Jujutsu was at its absolute peak. Techniques were a lot more refined back then, fights were a lot more dangerous, and the gap between the strongest and everyone else was enormous. The 11 sorcerers on this list came from that world, and understanding who they actually were explains why the modern era could never fully prepare for them. Ryumen Sukuna, the strongest in history. Before anything else, you have to understand Sukuna, because every other name on this list exists in relation to him in some way. Sukuna was not a god, he was an accursed spirit. He was a human sorcerer from the Heian era who simply could not be beaten. During his lifetime, the capital featured him as a celebrated idol at the Harvest Festival while being genuinely terrified of him at the exact same time. His true body had 4 arms and 2 mouths, a shape so monstrous people called him a demon, though the accurate word was sorcerer, and that distinction matters because it means every single impossible thing Sukuna did, he did as a human being, at the ceiling of what that is capable of. His innate technique, Shrine, fires precise slashing attacks at range, and produces flames that exceed the destructive output of Jogo, an unregistered special grade curse whose entire identity was built around fire. His cursed energy reserves are not just high, they're in their own category. Yuta Akotsu, who carries more cursed energy than Satoru Gojo, confirmed that Sukuna has at least double of what he himself possesses. In the Heian era alone, Sukuna killed the Sun, Moon, and Star Squad, the 5 MD Generals, and the Deshi Pacification Squad, using his 2 signature cursed tools. And after his death, he accepted Kenjaku's offer to be turned into a cursed object, splitting his soul across 20 indestructible fingers to remain in existence rather than disappear. Kenjaku is the only person who knew how to perform this process, and Sukuna only learned to do it himself after experiencing it once. 1,000 years later, he was still there. Kenjaku, the ancient mastermind. Kenjaku is the oldest human on this list, and the architect of almost everything that happens in the series. He has survived for over 1,000 years using a single method, transplanting his brain into other bodies and taking control of them. His only fixed physical feature is his brain, which has teeth and the surgical stitching that circles the top of whatever head he currently occupies. He has lived inside the Kamo clan's head sorcerer, Yuji Itadori's mother, and Suguru Geto, whose body he wore for the final arc. Each host gave him access to their innate technique in addition to his own, which is what makes him genuinely difficult to fight. He doesn't arrive with one ability, he arrives with a catalog. What makes Kenjaku more dangerous than almost anyone else on this list is a gap between his power and his patience. Kenjaku is the second most capable barrier user in the world behind Tengen. He has accumulated Jujutsu knowledge across 1,000 years of direct experience, and he's the only person who understood how to turn a sorcerer's soul into a cursed object after death, which is what made Sukuna's continued existence possible. His domain expansion, Womb Profusion, takes the form of a pillar constructed from cursed spirits. He engineered the entire culling game, convinced hundreds of sorcerers across centuries to agree to return, manipulated foreign governments into participating, and still found time to be genuinely annoyed about it. The Angel, Technique Extinguishment. The Angel fought Sukuna during the Heian era, and lost. She was a member of the Deshi Pacification Squad, the elite combat unit of the Abe clan, which also included remnants of the Sugawara clan, the ancestral line that would eventually produce Satoru Gojo and Yuta Akotsu. They mounted a direct assault on Sukuna while he was alive, and were driven back by him wielding his 2 signature cursed tools, and that defeat became the defining moment of her existence. 1,000 years later, she came back still calling him the Disgraced One, still with his death listed as her primary objective before anything else. What she brings to a fight is something no other sorcerer in this series possesses. Her innate technique, Technique Extinguishment, negates any cursed technique it's applied to, with no exceptions. Barriers fall under it, seals fall under it, cursed objects fall into it. There's no type of jujutsu that sits outside its reach. Her extension technique, Jacob's Ladder, takes that negation and turns it into an attack, summoning a massive pillar of purifying light from the sky that burns away whatever it makes contact with. She used this at maximum output to attempt to remove Sukuna from a host body, and came close enough to make him take it seriously. Beyond her technique, the Angel is notable for something that most ancient sorcerers never considered. She chose to coexist with her host rather than override her, forming a genuine partnership with Hana Kurusu rather than erasing her consciousness entirely. Urame, Ice Formation. Urame has been standing next to Sukuna for 1,000 years, and that's not a figure of speech. They were at his side during the Heian era, they incarnated alongside his revival in the modern era, and they chose to decapitate themselves the moment they sensed he had died rather than continue existing without him. Sukuna originally found Urame as a young sorcerer who could not yet control their innate technique, which was freezing everything around them. Sukuna put that ability to work, keeping butchered meat preserved, and eventually had Urame develop cooking skills for specific dietary preferences. That last detail says everything about how close the relationship was, and how little Urame cared about anything outside of it. Urame's innate technique, Ice Formation, creates and manipulates ice at both small and large scales. Urame can exhale a cloud of freezing mist that materializes into thick columns of ice, capable of locking down an entire squad of sorcerers alone. Urame can also touch the ground to generate telekinetically controlled shards of of spiked ice that freeze their target on contact and rain down icicles to follow up. Urame's mastery extended to creative applications in the environment, such as freezing the ground to rupture underground water pipes and give themselves more material to work with mid-fight. Atsuya Kusakabe, regarded as one of Jujutsu High's strongest grade 1 sorcerers, considered Urame's sorcery entirely out of his league. Yoruzu, construction. Yoruzu was from Aizu, a rural region, and that background informed how the Heian capital received her. The well-mannered nobles considered her an awkward person, but she did not care. Her innate technique, construction, let her create almost any substance from nothing, as long as she understood it well enough and had the cursed energy to sustain it. The problem was that construction was one of the most energy inefficient techniques of the entire era. It burned through cursed energy way too fast, and even with Yoruzu's skills, she could barely keep up. But her solution came from insects. She studied them and identified something the Heian era's strongest fighters had overlooked: the efficiency of an insect's body relative to its function. She applied that logic to her technique and built insect armor, a construction that incorporated biological traits from multiple different strands of insect evolution into a single piece of armor. Combined with liquid metal at mid-range, a material she developed to have stable physical properties driven by semi-autonomous cursed energy, her fighting style produced results on par with the era's most elite units. Her prowess earned her formal recognition from the Fujiwara clan. On top of that, Yoruzu was the only sorcerer in the series capable of constructing a true sphere, a geometrically perfect shape with no contact point that generates infinite surface pressure. Her domain, threefold affliction, made the true sphere's hit guaranteed. Takako Uro, sky manipulation. Takako spent her first life as an assassin with no name. She was captain of the Sun, Moon, and Star Squad. The squad operated in total service to the clan, erasing their own identities as a matter of course. Eventually, a sorcerer within the Fujiwara gave Takako her name. Then he had her executed to cover up his own crime of killing another clan member, using her as a disposable proxy. She died for something she didn't do, carrying out a role that erased her and then killed her for it. Her innate technique, sky manipulation, gives her control over the sky as though it were a physical object. She can grip the atmosphere like a solid surface, warp it to deflect attacks, reshape space at range, and levitate with full freedom of movement. Her offensive move, then Icebreaker, doesn't strike the opponent directly. She hits the surface of the sky surrounding them and shatters it like a sheet of thin ice, driving a focused and unblockable shockwave into the target. Her ability to warp the trajectory of incoming attacks made her uniquely capable of redirecting Ryu Ishigori's Granite Blast and setting it straight back at its source. She could manipulate the paths of attack mid-flight, making direct engagement with her an exercise in fighting your own offense as much as hers. Her background as a professional assassin only added to that, since she understood how to strike from positions that eliminated her opponent's ability to respond cleanly. Ryu Ishigori, Granite Blast. Ishigori had one problem his entire first life: nobody could feed him. He fought, he won, and at the end of every fight he still felt empty. He described the experience of battle as eating a meal, and the satisfaction of a genuinely great fight as dessert, and the dessert never came. He met a good woman during his lifetime. He didn't die with what he would call regrets, but none of it filled the specific hunger that he had. Kenjaku documented Ryu as having the highest cursed energy output of any sorcerer in all of recorded Jujutsu history, not just amongst his contemporaries, not just among Edo period fighters, the absolute peak across every era, including the golden age of the Heian period. His innate technique, cursed energy discharge, channels that output through his pompadour, which is shaped directly like a cannon and functions as one. Granite Blast, his primary attack, is a hyper-concentrated beam of cursed energy that at full power carries enough force to devastate multiple city blocks in a single shot. The specific detail that sets Ryu apart is that his output does not decrease when his innate technique is inactive. He produces the same volume of destructive power, regardless of whether he is using his technique or not. That means there's no strategic window where he becomes easier to engage. Every version of Ryu Ishigori is the maximum version. Dhruv Laktavala, Shikigami Domain. Dhruv is the oldest individual in the entire series. He was over 2,000 years old, which places his origins well before the Heian era. During the Civil War of Wa, the oldest documented conflict in Japanese history, Dhruv conquered the entire Japanese archipelago alone. That is the historical record attached to his name. And what makes him even more unusual is that before the modern era, he had already died once and independently found a method to incarnate himself without anyone's help. He had beaten death on his own terms, before Kenjaku was even part of the conversation. His return in the modern era, however, was through a deal with Kenjaku, just like everyone else on this list. His innate technique involves two types of Shikigami that orbited him continuously: large grotesque rodents at ground level, and small pterodactyl-like creatures in the air. The orbital paths those Shikigami traveled constituted an inviolable domain at all times, meaning that any person or object that crossed their paths was automatically slashed. And he never had to activate a separate domain. He never had to manually trigger the effect. It was simply always running. That permanent threat radius was severe enough that Kururoshi, a special grade cockroach cursed spirit, chose complete voluntary dormancy over risking an engagement with Dhruv directly. Hajime Kashimo, the god of lightning. Kashimo's first life was 400 years of overwhelming boredom. He was too strong for everyone he encountered. His cursed energy was at a level so far past those around him that he could never experience vulnerability. easily, never feel genuine pressure, and never find anyone worth the effort of caring about. The fights ended before they started. When Kenjaku found him in the old age standing over yet another field of bodies, Kashimo had one question: who is the strongest sorcerer you have ever known? Kenjaku said Sukuna. Kashimo agreed to everything on the spot. His cursed energy had the natural properties of electricity, meaning every reinforced strike he delivers shocks the target regardless of how they try to block it. It can't be guarded against conventionally. He can split his electrified cursed energy into positive and negative charges, apply the positive to the target, and discharge the negative directly through them as a lightning strike. Because the charges move through the target itself, rather than through the ground, the hit is a natural sure hit, one that functions entirely outside of a domain, requiring no domain expansion to guarantee contact. His innate technique, Mythical Beast Amber, goes further and reconstructs his own flesh to manifest raw electrical phenomena, and this happens at a level that the human body was not built to sustain. It's a one-way technique, and when the transformation concludes, his body crumbles to dust. He never used it once in 400 years of living and fighting, and he was not being cautious. He was saving the only use he had for the one opponent worth it. Reggie Star, contractual recreation. Reggie Star did not come back carrying trauma or obsession. He came back as a tactician. His innate technique, contractual recreation, lets him manifest the subject of any written contract by burning it with cursed energy. He prepared for every fight by organizing receipts for a wide catalog of objects across his body, giving him instant access to gasoline, vehicles, weapons, drones, and anything else he had thought to get a receipt for in advance. He also knew the Hollow Wicker Basket, the Heian era predecessor to Simple Domain, an ancient anti-domain technique that erects a barrier to neutralize a domain's guaranteed hit function. What made Reggie dangerous was not the versatility of the technique, but how he thought. He analyzed every situation, built plans around likely outcomes, and positioned himself ahead of what was coming rather than just reacting to it. He worked out that the large-scale event he had returned for was not what it appeared to be on the surface, predicted that whoever designed it would fundamentally change it once only the strongest remained, and spent his time preparing for that shift rather than chasing points. And he was right about all of the calling games. A sorcerer is nothing but a con artist, he told his opponent near the end, and he didn't say that as an insult. Iori Hazanoki, Explosive Flash. Hazanoki built his entire combat approach around a technique that requires hurting himself first. His innate technique lets him detach his own eyes and teeth, which are reinforced with cursed energy, and detonate them as explosive projectiles. The moment each part is launched, he uses reverse curse technique to regenerate it immediately and reload. What makes him elite is not the explosions themselves, but the rate at which he cycles through that process. Most sorcerers use reverse curse technique as a last resort to survive. Hazanoki used it as ammunition logistics, regenerating flesh constantly under pressure throughout a fight at a pace most top-tier sorcerers could not maintain casually. His technique worked best in combination. He coordinated with partners to layer his explosions on top of other effects, combining detonating teeth with gasoline to produce blasts significantly larger than either of them could create alone. He even planted explosives from angles that forced his targets to absorb damage or break position, then followed up before they could settle. This technique was not the most powerful on the list, but it was relentless. Hazanoki did not need to hit hard once, he just needed to keep going, and he had no reason to stop.